today is that we've all had a relationship with a very special man, Art Segool, and they made art, they broke the mold. All of us were heartbroken when he passed on, but we know that Art was a man of God, a man of faith, so we have to believe that he's actually in a better place. This is May, turkey hunting season, so hopefully all you ladies that don't hunt weren't too overly bored with all the stories you heard today. It's all in good fun. So what I thought we'd do today, of course our schedule got a little messed up, but that's how it is. Art taught me a long time ago, just go with the flow. You make the best of any situation and it'll all work out in the end. So what I thought I'd do is just say a few words, kind of talk about how this stone came to be. We've got a presentation here from by Anthony Birdie, who actually kind of ramrodded this whole thing. He's got a little presentation. And then what I'd like to do is what Art liked to do best, is tell stories. You don't want to listen to me speechifying because, number one, I'm not very good at it. Number two, it'll be boring as all get out. So what I'd like to, that while we're going along, kind of think of something that you'd like to share. And I think Art, who I know is smiling down at us right now, I think he would enjoy that too. Whenever we were having our classes and it was a bluebird day like today, he'd kind of lean over to and say, Mr. Jerry, Baja's shining, or Baja's smiling on us today. It's going to be a good day. And if, for you non-Polish speaking people, Baja is God. So I remembered that, and I think it's very fitting. So friends, Baja is smiling on us today. Today is a good day. So how did this come to be? Number one, we were inspired by Art's dedication, his passion for hunting and fishing and actually all things outdoors. I taught the hunter education class with Art for I don't know how many years, probably 25 to 30 for as long as he's been here at West Falls. And he taught me so much, and it was such a marvelous man. I have to tell you that I think probably one of the biggest blessings in my personal life is all the wonderful, generous people that I've had to meet along the way. I just, it's amazing how many great people there are, and I count Art as cream of the crop, top of the list. At Art's memorial, you know, he was a pretty private man. He wasn't boastful. He didn't talk about himself. I was just absolutely blown away by all the things that Art did. And it wasn't for Art. Art lived for others. He lived for his God, he loved his God, and he loved his family. And I would get stories about the grandkids are doing this, the grandkids are doing that, and this one's doing this, and this one's doing that. And then I'd get hunting stories as well. That was Mr. Art. He loved to share those stories. So, how this came to be. Number one, we needed to capture the passion that Art carried with him all his years that he was able to hunt and fish and share his knowledge with our youngsters. And because of that, we, well actually it was for Sandy Kirkham. Here's Sandy. Anthony Birdie, where are you, Anthony? Anthony Birdie was working on his Eagle Scout project, and he came to Sandy and said, well, what do you think I might be able to do? And she said, well, how about something for Art? So Sandy provided the idea, and then young Anthony took it from there, met with the board of directors, made some wonderful presentations. They came up with the concept for this stone, and here we are today. So we're, as human beings, we're only here for a very short time. This piece of granite behind me here, that's going to be here around a lot longer than any of us. So hopefully we can share our knowledge of Mr. Art with future generations as they walk by that stone, and hopefully get some sort of inspiration and get a little flavor of what Mr. Art was all about. Now, I know Art was a good man. How do I know Art was a good man? My dog told me so. Art loved dogs, as did I. I don't have a dog right now, but my dog told me Art is top of the list. My wife and I, Sue, had an office in Orchard Park, and it was a good thing that in our office we were able to take our golden retriever to work with us every day. And Sue was my administrative assistant, but she was also Art's administrative assistant. So whenever Art needed anything for his classes, making copies, word processing, what have you, he would pay us a visit and put his order in. Well, Callie, our golden retriever, you know what a fierce guard dog they are, right? Art just no sooner got out of his vehicle, he had 2 doors to go through, but before Art was through that second door, Callie was up looking for her stuffed hedgehog to present to Mr. Art. Tail wagging, and then the whole dog was wagging, and she'd come in. She wasn't a barker, most golden retrievers aren't, but she was singing her Callie song. And then wiggling back and forth. Mr. Art scratching her ears, and then we'd get the customary belly rub. On her back, all 4s in the air, and Art would be down on his knees, rubbing Callie's belly, and you could just see the look on Callie's face, and she looked over and said, "This is world-class belly rub. He's number 1 in my book." So I know that Art is top-notch. I believe my dog. Some of the Art stories. We used to have the Region 9 Youth Archery Camp here on the property, where we used the full 50 acres of the property, up and down the hills, going back and forth, doing our thing. It was a weekend-long event. And this particular youth camp, Art volunteered to help build bluebird boxes. And this particular year, he brought along his buddy, Dick Kirby. And I was kind of I think Jack and I were probably chairman of the camp, so I was just kind of overseeing everything, right? This is the first time that these kids have had power tools in their hands. So each kid was assigned an adult. So we didn't have to practice the first aid portion of the class sooner than planned. So I'm watching this all go on, right? We had actually broke the class up into three separate groups. So there's 10 kids, they're all working along. And I'm watching everybody have a good time and everything. And I happened to I couldn't help myself. A big smile came over my face, and I'm looking at Dick, and I'm looking at Art, and I can't figure out who's having the better time here, the kids or the adults. It's just a wonderful experience. And those guys, even after the segment was over and done with, they didn't leave. Somehow Dick got a hold of a bunch of magic markers and started drawing on the bluebird boxes, and it was just really something. It was pretty cool. So very enjoyable. So Art, premier educator. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn this over to Anthony and let him do his part. And then after that, please, hopefully you got a couple of good stories to share. I'd love to hear the story about how this picture came to be. That would be great.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Jerry introduced me, I'm Anthony Birdie, and I did this memorial for my Eagle project. I just got a little speech written down on my phone on the impact Art had on me and other stuff such as that. The first time I met Mr. Art Segool was when I was 10. I was coming to the club to shoot archery with my father, and Mr. Segool had all his furs laid out on the table along with racks, skulls, and a bunch of other cool things that would capture the eyes of a young outdoorsman such as myself. Immediately I thought this man was one of the coolest people I'd ever met. As I grew older and started hunting, I took my hunter safety course here at West Falls, and Art was leading the class. he paved the way for me to fall in love with the outdoors and to be where I am today as a conservationist. This morning I was turkey hunting, and as I was waiting for a gobble that I didn't hear because they were quiet this morning, I thought to myself, there's no place I'd rather be than in the woods. Even if I'm not seeing anything, it's all part of the experience. If it weren't for men like Mr. Segool, I wouldn't have these thoughts and I wouldn't have such a passion for being in the woods. Throughout the years, I've been coming to West Falls, whether it be to shoot archery on Tuesdays or go to the gun range with my dad and brother. So when the board members at West Falls reached out to me and said that they were thinking about putting up a memorial, I jumped at the fact and knew I wanted to be the one to build it. I wanted his memory to be around here forever, so as I got older, my peers and I could bring our kids, sit on that bench, and hopefully create another generation of passionate conservationists. So, thank you, Art, for all the good things that he's done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Oh my God.
And as I mentioned, this piece of granite here is going to be around for a long time. Where's Randy? Randy Wagner, way in the back there. You can't see him. Well, Randy donated the stone and produced this piece of artwork. A highly skilled craftsman that he is. I don't know if he's the owner of Wagner Monuments, is still dad holding the reins, but anyway.
He's there every day.
Randy's still working for Dad at Wagner Monuments. So, I mean, when I first saw this thing, I was absolutely blown away. You have to come up close and look at that stone, because it is definitely a work of art in more ways than one. All right, who wants to tell a story?
I want to tell how this all happened.
All right.
I don't know if people here know Charlie McClure and Jake, and they were going to be here because they are the ones that took that picture. They are the ones that dragged the 2 deer out of the woods. And when I first came upon it I was home waiting for Art to come home from hunting, which every wife has been doing year after year after year. And all of a sudden, several, at least 3 or more, pickup trucks come zooming in my yard, get out of their pickup trucks, and it's all these men talking to each other, and I have a vision problem. So I'm thinking, and it wasn't Art, he wasn't there. And I'm thinking, why are these, who is this and what are they doing in my yard? So I thought maybe they'd go away, but they didn't go away. So I opened the door and I said, identify yourselves, I don't see well. And everybody took their hat off. I don't know what that meant, but they all took their hat. And Charlie said, I'm Charlie McClure. I'm Jake McClure. And every person, I recognized every name. And I knew, okay, this is safe, this is all Art's friends. And so I said, and why are you in my yard? And they said, didn't you hear what the old guy did now? And I said, no, I haven't heard from the old guy. So they said, he shot 2 bucks, one with his buck tag, one with his doe tag, and the 2 deer were next to each other. When he shot the one, the other one didn't move. So he shot it. So that's how he got the 2 deer. Kevin Struble is his chief dragger. But Kevin must have been working or something. And Charlie gets this call, hey, I need somebody to drag the 2 deer that I got out of the woods. And so Charlie and Jake agreed to do it. Meanwhile, everybody's got their flip phones and they call each other. Nobody calls me. I'm incidental in this. So that's how, as they found out, people started coming over. And then Art pulled in the yard. And Oh my gosh, what a lot of talk and hanging deer and that. I stayed in the house and I waited, and then eventually at night, of course I had to go out and see the deer. But that's how that came to be. And I'm sorry that Charlie wasn't here, but he's got the flu.
Oh.
So that's what happened.
Thank you, Charlie, for not sharing.
Yeah.
I mean, I can fill in a little bit on that, but
Come on up, Kevin.
on the deer story, everybody wants to know how that came to be.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. So I'm Kevin Struble. Well, we all went by like code names, right? So this is back in the walkie-talkie days, and so we don't want anybody to know who you are in the woods. So he was the steel man. Art was the steel man. Worked at the steel plant. There's many others here that all have their own names for various reasons. I was nicknamed the Dragger. So as started out with Art. I've known him forever, right? My dad and him were best friends. So since I was tall enough to walk, I was in the woods. So I think Dragger came about Thanksgiving. It's more than I remember it. I'm not sure. I think Art shot the deer as far away from the road as you can get. And it was a Thanksgiving. It was about 60 degrees, so there's no snow on the ground. And so, of course, I'm the youngest member, a strapping 16-year-old. What better to have him drag the deer out of the woods while the entire hunting party follows behind and kind of lobs just a cheery sense of keep going up ahead. So,
Cheering you on.
cheering me on. So that was kind of from then on I was the dragger. Whenever Art had a deer, I was one of the ones to call. We live pretty close, and I was around most of the time. So I spent many times dragging different deer. Before I didn't even have a driver's license. I don't know who picked me up. I think Colleen picked me up.
Oh, I was mad that day.
Yeah, he dropped me off at the railroad tracks. That was one. So he liked to hunt behind his house. That was a good one. That was in the younger. This was before I couldn't even drive, but I could pick up a phone and I was home. And Art shot a deer this is by the railroad tracks by the John Deere dealer there. So just drop them off on the tracks and just start walking into the woods. I'll find you. Okay, I'll just start walking down the railroad tracks, and there were no houses back there at that time. So lo and behold, a half a mile back in the woods, there's Art standing on the railroad tracks, and there's a deer 150 yards in the woods that let's go gut it out, drag it out, and I think Alan met us at the street finally and helped get it there and shuffle me back to my house because I couldn't drive and now I'm stranded 10 miles from my house. So those just there's many stories, but this one in particular, he was everyone knows he by this point we can't walk too far, but I think Hank's here. We had a food plot behind the house. So what better to attract deer in the middle of just late December here than a food plot? But there's a lot of snow. I know he had a little blind next to some pines. I believe that's where he was on this case. So me being a youngster, I would just run down into the woods to the blind and sit right down because I don't have a lot of time on my hands. It probably took him an hour and a half to get the 150 yards from the house down to the blind because he would want to make sure the wind is perfect. He didn't spook any of the deer, anything that was there. I know he was there, set up, and later, so we had a significant amount of snow, I know that, there, but we had the one deer came up over there's a little gully that kind of come up into this food plot, came up, and of course, obviously, he sees a nice set of antlers and says, well, hey, this is my time, right? So takes the first shot, hits the deer. It's a muzzleloader, right? So smoke, cloud, we can't see anything like the movies. He's kind of got to raise up on one knee. Does he see another? Is what's there? You always got to reload because you never know. So I think in the meantime, as he's trying to reload, there's another deer that pops up on the hill, up over the little rise. And so as reloading, you can kind of imagine this. Go as slow as he could, but not too slow, but not too fast, just to try to make this all happen. And lo and behold, he was able to get up on his knees, I believe, and take the second shot at the second deer that decided to show itself. Luckily, he had a Rolodex full of people to call whenever he needed help. So I believe I was probably on some time. I was probably working is what had happened. But again, I had Charlie's number, called up Charlie, and so there it goes. But there was never a shortage of people to show up. There's countless stories just like that for Art. So there's you could go on and on with stories. But this one was definitely a once in a lifetime. Maybe once in my life I'll be able to shoot 2 deer with a muzzle loader back to back. That normally doesn't happen. No, that really was a great experience. I know, just a little bit for Art. He always had a passion. I mean, I have a passion for the outdoors, probably from him, my dad. He's affected so many people. So many firsts happened for me with him. You always had a dog, Molly. I got my first fall turkey with him. Doing that, he drove the turkeys down the hill and right into me and my dad. So always selfless as far as that, especially with the kids. And I think I had the joy of being one of those youngsters growing up that got to have the fruits of those many years of experience. And then on the later end, I was the one dragging out the deer.
There's a price to pay for everything.
There is. That was, I used to kind of, if I would use one up, but every time I used one up, there was always like 10 more that came about. So I never did get to finish it off. He was always amazing at many different things. Fishing. He loved to trout fish, and we used to go down to a camp this time of year, right? So May, turkey scouting, and they always stocked the Genesee with rainbows. So we had a spot we would go, and so we'd go down with them. We'd go down behind these couple houses. Great little spot. Oh yeah, they got the fish in here. I went the day before. They're all here. Okay, casting out. Down 20 minutes, and I'm not getting anything. No bites, nothing. You look at 100 feet down the stream, and every cast. Oh, there's another one. He wheels it in. And then he'll disappear down, and I'll go. Oh, he just caught him right there. I'm gonna go right down to the same hole. Didn't matter what I did. I couldn't catch a fish. So to this day, I don't know what I did wrong, because it was funny. We laughed about it, but just had the technique, the patience, which is something that I guess we all acquire eventually to devote to wildlife and just to have the patience to wait it out. And that's what happened. So I don't want to take up all the time. I could tell stories forever of all of our times together at different camps, and with many of the individuals here that were part of that in one form or another. So I don't want to take up everybody's time here, but feel free. Anybody to jump up.
Thank you, Kevin. Who else would like to share? Don't be shy.
I gotta tell.
Oh, there we go. I was actually starting to get worried as we come across this thing, right? Jack's been
I didn't
soaking
see
his...
anybody move, so I figured I'd take the next hour.
He's been putting his toes in the sand lately.
One thing Art and I kind of shared for years, and that's telling long stories with great detail.
Oh boy. I've heard them.
Colleen, I
You're gonna
apologize
hear them
to you
again.
in advance, and the rest of you, tough luck. Art came to the club. I've been a member up here forever, and Jerry and I got certified as sportsman educators many years ago. And Jerry was the lead in the bow, and I was the lead in the gun. And Art came on board the team, and he was an excellent instructor. And then some time went by, and well, for one thing, he taught the bow and the gun, and I was teaching trapping also alone until Art came around. And Art and I taught the trapping class together for years. Even when he was kind of gift up, he'd teach the water trapping session in the pond. I remember one day I went over to check on him, and one of the students is kind of urging me on, and Art's stuck in the mud in the shallow end. He couldn't walk good to begin with, and I had to kind of help drag him up out of that shallow end, but he wouldn't give it up. So anyway, as years went by, he joined the team, and then eventually he retired. And that's when I got real mean with him, because I always had to make the goofy phone calls and register the class. Back then we didn't do the internet junk and the online and the texty thing. So I told Art, you're retired now. You You got to pick up all the materials. You got to do the outline. You got to register, make all the phone calls and junk, and I'll teach anything you tell me. So from that point on, he was our lead man. We're all hunter safety, and him and I still taught trapper training classes together. And the cool thing is about stories and long ones is everybody has their version. So when this happened with Art, he come up to the club and he says, I got a story to tell you. So we sat down. So while he's telling the story, I envisioned him sitting when he shot these deer. And I don't know if he was sitting or he just happened to be sitting when he was telling the story. But it was the late muzzleloader season. And he was telling me about that field back behind the house and the pines that kind of went up to the neighbor's house. And I think, if I remember right, he told me he actually drove down the neighbor's driveway and then gradually snuck in. Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
He was parked at the neighbors, and then
Yeah.
it was a shorter walk.
it was shorter than coming from his own house to his backyard. If he drove down the neighbor's driveway, walk out of them pines, and he had a blind or something, a stool back there, and that buck come along and he shot it. And the way he described this to me, which again was very lengthy. I mean, I had the details of that buck before ever seeing the picture and the shot. And again, this is muzzleloader season. So he shoots it, and the cloud clears, and he's looking, and this other buck appears. And this is the way he told me the version, or the way my pea brain remembers it.
Yeah, it's the memory.
And he's sitting there looking at this buck, and he's thinking, I got all my tags. I still got my regular season buck. I can shoot that deer. So in the story, he was sitting. So he's showing me. He's got to reload that muzzleloader. But he can't make movements. He's facing that deer. So he did one of these. And the whole time he's telling the story, and you're going to feel the pain of this. And he inched all the way around. And then he's showing me how he's reloading the muzzleloader. And he inched all the way back around again. And lo and behold, that buck's still standing there, and he dumped him. And then the rest of the story goes on from there. And I guess Charlie's the one who came and saved him and did the dragging and such. I knew Charlie many years ago. Charlie ran coon dogs. My buddy Bill Baker ran coon dogs. And on occasion, they'd call me up and say, hey, you want to go along? We're running tonight. And I didn't catch on for a long time. Keep in mind, I'm not real bright. But when you're coon hunting, a lot of the times coon are way up in the tree and you can't get a good shot at them, and it's at night and you're using lights. So someone has to go up that tree. That's what they needed Jack for, because I used to be a monkey man, and I'd go up the tree and shag them down. And one night, I'm with Charlie and we're running dogs. He's like, oh, coon's up here, get up that tree. And I'm like, there's this hemlock tree that take 2 or 3 people to get their arms around. It was a while to get to the first branch, but back then I could climb. I got that first branch, and this is in the dark, of course, and I'm climbing away, and I can see the lights getting really small. And I'm climbing, and I'm like, oh, it's farther. Go up. We can see the eyes. It's farther. Keep going. You're almost there. And I'm like, the tree's getting real little. Doing one of these things. I guess I'm supposed to be talking about Art, but I'm extending it on to Charlie McClure here to give you an idea how his buddy Charlie was. So I get all the way up there, and he's like, okay, we can see him now. You got him towards the top of the tree. Duck. Duck. What are you talking about? All of a sudden, I'm like, what are you doing? Keep your head behind the tree. I'm like, the tree's only as big around as my arm. And apparently they hit him in the second or third shot, and here comes the coon's going to come down now. Well, I'm more of the tree than the tree is, so climbed all the way down past me. Gets down farther. You hear another shot, and the dogs go crazy. And off through the woods goes the dog, the coon, and the lights. And I'm 80 feet up in a hemlock tree somewhere in the middle of the woods. But that was Charlie McClure, my buddy Bill, and me. But I think that relates very well to some of Art's antics over the years. Heard a lot of stories from him. While we were teaching trapping together, picked up some cool tips. If I was to teach a trapping class now, and even a hunter safety class now when teaching, there's a lot of new developments that us old timers don't know nothing about. And Art was considerably older than me, and he taught me stuff that the old timers did that we didn't do anymore when I started. So it was pretty cool. But Art was a good dude, and he took over that hunter safety program. What else? slapping me or nothing. And I got one last one to talk about art and hunter safety. Every 2 years we have to go to this refresher where the paid people from the state tell you how to be as a human being when you're teaching these classes and what you can and can't do, and new regulations, and when you have to stand on only your left foot, and what you got to say, and how you got to be politically correct, and all these different things. One of the ones was, now, you can't really touch a student. Now, when you're teaching how to hold a gun and how to kneel and how to lay down and stuff and do these things, the occasion comes up where you have to aid these students. So they're paid individuals from the state with a lot more intelligence than me, and their answer was, and I was sitting with Art during this, before you touch a student, if you have to, first you have to come up to them and say, I'm going to touch you now. I'm like, are you friggin' kidding me? Me and Art are laughing. And they're like, can you guys hold it down? No. You can't hold it down, you're an idiot. You don't come up to somebody and say, I'm going to touch you now. And then you can only touch him in the back. Well, what good is that going to do? You can't. So then they move on to, there's no hazing or punishment. You can't do anything like this. But when the kids that screw up in the class, we make them do push-ups. So it wasn't but a couple of weeks after that refresher where they told us what you can and can't do, when you can't touch anybody without telling them you're going to touch them, which makes them feel real comfortable. And you can't haze them. So we had one kid that was total pain, and Art and I are talking. I'm like, what's this fallacies? Oh no, I got this. All right, get up here, you in front of everybody. Get down, give me some push-ups. Give me 10 push-ups. And Art puts his foot on his back. And I'm like, Art, what are they going to do? Fire us? We're volunteers. And we didn't get fired as much as we tried over the years. But that was Art. And when he told me that story, the whole time he had this little envelope with him. He's telling me the story and telling me the story. And he says, here, I want you to have this. Open it up. And it was an 8x10 glossy of that picture right there. And when Mr. Anthony Birdie and the board and everybody got to talking and stuff, Randy said he'd big stone, and I said, you know what? I got this picture. Leonard got them two here. So he took that picture and put it in his double secret computerized stone etching device or whatever he does. I hope he didn't do all that by hand. Did you? You did. So anyway, he's a much better artist than I am. So that's where the picture came from, and that copy there was a copy we had made. I can't remember who, or if he gave it to the club too, but we hung that on the wall. For that, or his day, we took those 2 nice bucks. And this red oak here, that bent over white oak back there, and all the other oaks on this property, with the exception of like 3 up on the very top of the hill, I planted from acorns, a bunch of which we picked up in Pennsylvania. Some of the other folks here probably helped me plant some of them. And I tell people that, and they're like, yeah, so you're a weirdo that plants trees. Yeah, that's true. But Art appreciated that. He appreciated something like this. So when Anthony was talking about this, I said, I got a suggestion. How about doing it over here by that oak tree? I think Art would like that. And I brought him up a turkey tail feather today and left it there under a stone. I never was much at calling turkeys, but I could hunt. And I killed my fair share of turkeys when I was younger. But Art was an artist. Him and Dick Kirby were close friends. And of course, Dick was probably one of the best turkey callers on the planet. Art was pretty darn close. Some time for hunter safety part where we talked about turkeys. And I'm going to put this in a very strange way, but Art and I would take care of that turkey calling part. Art would do all the turkey calling, all descriptive work, and I would pretend to be a turkey. And while he was calling me, I'd come out from behind the chair, and he'd hold up a stick or some darn thing or nothing, and go bang, and I'd fall over and flop on the ground. Attaboy, Art.
Who's next? Anybody else?
First of all, this is awesome. I can't try to express too much how much this means to our family. It would just be too hard for me to do that. But this is a beautiful thing you all have done, and we're just so appreciative of it. And Dad would love this spot. It's just so beautiful on a night like tonight, in the shade. It's just great. And so thank you so much. I'm Dan. I am a work of art.
And Pauline.
Yeah, and we're really glad to be here today. This is just a really special thing. And I knew about this. I received some pictures of it a while ago, but I thought I'm not going to come until we actually dedicate it. So I'm going to tell just a few really brief hunting stories. But we've talked about the scene. So I live out of town. I'm in Ohio. Sometimes I would get the story. Sometimes I would get a package in the mail. That's what happened with this. That's my framed picture. Because my dad would send me pictures of deer that he shot. And so it was framed. So when I saw the picture of the stone, I was like, I have that picture. And the date on that picture is December of 2013. I believe it was the last day of the muzzleloader season that year. And so he, as you know, he ended up getting the 2 deer. So in December of 2013, today would have been Dad's 86th birthday. So December of 2013, he would have been 76 years old. And you know, it was hard for him to walk long distances. He certainly couldn't drag deer anymore. Well, I'll tell you, he could still shoot straight. And the last hunting season that we had, he was 79, and he nailed the deer from his stand. No problem at all. And Kevin and I went over and found that deer and dragged it out. And so he could shoot perfect still. It's just the other, and he could still get up in a stand. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. But just a couple of things. You talked a little bit about his, like, you know, how he described things in great detail. We would go hunting somewhere, and he'd say, okay, we'd get to the edge of a woods or field. I want you to go about 150 yards to the end of that hedge. Make a right. You'll see a big oak tree. Right after it, there's a couple hemlocks and then a pine tree. Stand right under the pine tree, and I'm going to do a drive. And I'm like, where's the oak tree? But that's how he would be. This is right here. There's a hemlock there. There's an oak tree there. There's a pine tree there. There's a big rock there. And I just couldn't see everything that he could see. But there's so many hunting stories that you could tell about Dad. I'm going to tell you one that goes right back to the beginning of his marriage. And Mom had, I'm quite convinced, Mom had no idea what she was getting into as far as hunting when she married Dad. I mean, she just didn't understand how big a part. I mean, I know you know he hunted.
Yeah,
She
but he
didn't know
was a
what a passion
soldier.
was. So they're in the car after the wedding ceremony, and someone is driving them to the reception. And here's a guy coming out of the woods. Dad made whoever was driving the car stop. He got out of the car. Of course, the guy coming out of the woods was somebody he knew, and he wanted to find out what was going on and get a report on hunting conditions. So, I mean, we'll get to the reception when we get there. We got to find this out. So that was the, you know, hadn't even been married a couple hours, and that was a foreshadowing of things to come for Mom. And just one other story. I told this at his memorial, so some of you may have heard it, but to me it's one of the funniest stories with him. These days we all pretty much use ladder stands, but in the old days people would just, nail some things onto a tree and build a platform up there and up you go. And Dad was hunting somewhere down near Springville, and he found a stand that somebody had made. He went up in the stand, he was hunting up there for a while, and then he decided to come down. And when he came down, one of the ring that his foot was on broke, and he was hanging on up here, and he twisted around and he pulled his shoulder out of joint and fell on the ground. And when he fell on the ground, his arm was like this and he couldn't get it down. And so he got his gun, got his gun, he went to the car. Was he driving a stick shift then? I think maybe he was. Got everything in the car, and he drove to the hospital in Springville like this.
Oh my goodness.
He went to the hospital, they put him on a table, and some doctor, they held him on the table, and the doctor grabbed his arm, popped it back in, put him in a sling, and he came home. And so he comes home and we're talking, and I said to him, I said, well, I guess your hunting season is over. And boy, did I get a dirty look. I got a really dirty look. And he didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. But the next weekend, he figured out, he shot left-handed. And he figured out that if you put the arm in a sling like this, he could set his gun like this and figure out how to shoot. And he shot at least one deer that way. But that's how he was. He just wouldn't give up. And I think of all the qualities that my dad had, I think the one thing that I saw was the toughness. And when he was young, he would physically just do a lot of tough things. He'd carry me across creeks with all our hunting gear and stuff like that. But what I realized is as he got older and he couldn't physically do some of the things, it wasn't a physical toughness, it was a mental toughness. And I think about that sometimes in my life when I'm going through something that's difficult, that to ingrain that toughness in your mind and to push forward. So that's my hunting stories. And thank you all so much for doing this. This is awesome.
Still light out. Time enough for some more stories.
This is the flyover.
Hello everybody, my name is Chase. All these stories are funny because I go to school, I go to Cairn University right outside of Philly, and even when I'm at school and things happen, I always think, that's an art thing, right? So like all these different stories, that's an art thing, that's an art thing. Well, to me, I know them as grandpa's things. But just like some of the characteristics he talked about with like toughness and perseverance and consistency and his just passion for others and the outdoors. And my story is it's a funny story, but it's about his servant heart and just the way he served and cared for others. So like I said, we live right outside of Philadelphia, and for our church, we did a mission trip up here one year, and we were staying at the church. Was it Grandma's Church? Grandma's Church. Yeah, that church. And so we were staying there, and so we had all these kids there and everything. And I remember my dad, Eric, he said to Art, he said, "Listen, like we're gonna be doing this bonfire, and we're gonna be playing games and s'mores and marshmallows and all that. Like, could you make a little fire for us?" And the Art thing that comes into play is he's like, yeah, of course. And so we're doing our thing inside the church. We're, whatever, having fun, eating dinner. And then it gets later outside, and we all go outside. And I was a lot smaller then, so I could be exaggerating a little bit, but he might have made a fire that was around 8 feet tall. And we just walk outside and he just has this whole teepee hut just afire. And that's just an art thing. But the moral of the story is that all came from his servant's heart. Can you do this? Yes, was his immediate response. And I always appreciated that about him. So, thank you.
More stories? Looks like we're storied out.
I can share one.
There's never enough stories. If you're a hunter, they can go on forever and ever.
Well, this is about hunters. I'm Ellen. I'm Art's daughter, and I don't hunt at all. But the thing of it is it like takes over your household, or at least the way my dad did things. It takes over your household. And so I remember, I'm not a morning person at all. So I remember this one morning, I think I was in high school, and my bedroom and a bathroom were on the second floor, but I think something was missing from my bathroom, maybe shampoo or something. So I came downstairs to get it, and I was in such a fog, and I walked through the kitchen to the bathroom, you know, kind of like this, you know, and went in the bathroom, got what I wanted, came out, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, the kitchen is full of men. And it was, people were smoking, which never happens in my house. They were smoking in the kitchen like early in the morning. It was thick with smoke. They were all in camouflage and like had the black paint, you know? And my dad's got the kitchen table when it was up against the windows, and he had a map, and he was going like this and everything. But when I walked out, somebody said, "Well, good morning," like this, and I was like, oh God, people are seeing me. So I quickly made my way out of the kitchen, and I went and I leave. I woke up my mother at that time, but maybe I told her later, I don't know. And I said, Mom, this is not normal. We're not normal in this house. I went to bed with a normal family, and I woke up in a trench in Vietnam. Anyways.
Anybody?
I just wanted to thank all of you for coming and to tell you that Bill Gummel is here. Is he here still?
Yeah, over here.
Yeah. All right, Bill Gummel. First of all, we should congratulate him because he is the chief of police of Lackawanna as of last week, I think. And Art had to have, what did he have to have? You had to be there, Bill. I can't remember why, but you were there a lot of times with Art. So, and they became very, very good friends. And also down at Hickory Hill, which is a brigade camp, Bill was down there with Art. And Art has always been involved with kids, his own kids. But the last one that he was really involved with was Eli Stark, who's, put your hand up, Eli, if you're still here.
He's here.
He's behind me.
Okay. Eli goes to our church, and Art used to help clean the church on Fridays, and Eli went up to Art and said, could I hold the vacuum cord while you vacuum, Mr. Art? And Art says to him, well, I'll tell you what, you vacuum, I'll teach you how, and I'll hold the cord. And they became such friends, and now Eli is a Romeo, and a Romeo is a person that cleans the church, and Eli is the youngest person in that group. Eli is the youngest member in our church, and he's also a trustee, and he's 14 years old. Wow. So,
All right, if there's no other stories, what I'd like to do is, Eric Segool is a pastor in the Philadelphia area, and I'd like for him blessing on this stone will last for eons. See what Eric
Yeah. Hey, again, my name is Eric Segool. I'm the youngest of Art's kids, and so I'm honored and privileged to be here with you. I just want to close you with something, because if Dad was here, this is what he would say. Listen, my father loved the outdoors, and I'm seeing faces now of people, and I know I heard your soul story from my father himself. I'm grateful for all of you, because for many of us, I live just outside of Philadelphia. Dan lives in Ohio. Brian lives down in Georgia. Ellen lives in Rochester, and so many of you have played an intricate role is almost like surrogate children and helping them, and that's just been wonderful. But I want you to know that if my dad was here, he would be honored, and he would be so grateful, and he would be laughing and going along with stories and then telling you how you said it wrong, and he'll say it over again and this and that. But I want you to know that my father's biggest passion was his relationship with Jesus Christ. And I want to share this with you, because I feel like if Dad was here, he would go, don't leave before you tell him the most important thing. My father shared with me, he was a first generation Christian. So it wasn't like he grew up and like, well, my grandmother knew it, and then my mom knew it, and then he was a first generation Christian. And he talked about how Jesus Christ changed his life as a young soldier coming back from Korea and meeting people in the church across the street, and a woman bringing an apple pie to my mom and different things like that. And it changed his life. And I just want you to know, I want you to do this, and it may seem kind of corny, but I just want you to humor me for a second. But if you take your fingers and you hold them here against your throat, you can feel your pulse. If you don't, raise your hand, because that's not good. But you feel your pulse. Your pulse goes around your body. It goes through your brain. It goes everywhere. The neurons trigger in your brain, and it sends messages through your body at over 200 miles an hour. And it tells you different things. And every time you feel that pulse, it's God saying yes. He's saying yes to the things that you want to do. And for my father, it said yes to growing up and learning and hunting and fishing and doing all these things. And yes to education somewhat. And then yes to meeting my mom, and yes to getting married, and yes to military service, and yes to Bethlehem Steel, and yes to family and children and growing up and all these things. And that pulse goes on and on and on, and it's like this is going, your pulse is racing, and you go through life and you see all these things happen. And even tonight, sharing at dinner, and Alan and I are talking about stuff, and we're talking about things that happened 30 some years ago, and I go, wow, time is going by. But on November 4th, 2017, God said, Art, no. I'm saying no. And the end result is everything that we cherish in life, it'll come to an end. There'll be people who will sit here someday and go, how do you even pronounce this guy's name? But the end result is I teach people the Bible for a living. I'm a pastor. And there's some things in the Bible that are very complicated. And I admit it. People ask me questions sometimes. I go, gosh, I got to get back to you. But in John 14:6, Jesus said something that was crystal clear. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father, no one comes to God except through me. Through me alone. And so I want to ask you 3 questions that I just want you to consider and think about. Is when God says no to your pulse, when he says, hey, you're doing all these things, but no more, where are you going? Why are you going there? And are you comfortable with that answer? See, I've talked to a lot of people, and they'll go, well, gosh, Eric, I'm young. I don't have anything to worry about. I'm doing this thing. Well, where are you going? I don't know. Or they'll say, well, I'm going to heaven. And I'll say, that's great. Why? Well, I just suppose I'm going to heaven. And then at the end of the day, I'll say, are you comfortable with your own answer? And all I'm asking people, if my dad was here, he would say, listen, where are you going? Why are you going there? And are you comfortable with that answer? Because tonight, if you lay your head down and you're not comfortable with those 3 answers in your own life, I don't know you. I know a little bit about you. I don't know you, but I know this. If you love my Father and you want to see him again, you got to be confident in those 3 answers. Because Jesus didn't say, well, I'm a way to heaven. He didn't say, well, I'm part of the road. No, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. And so I want to honor my Father. And tonight we did honor my Father. But I wanted to share this message because it's that important. It's that important. I just want you to see him again. I know where he is. I know where he is. And I remember the day he died. And I remember the next day that my kids were on a retreat. And I remember the next day sitting all 3 of them down. And it's like, guys, and I could see their face drop. And they said, just say it. And I remember I said to my son, Grandpa's gone. And after crying and crying, my middle son came up to me and said, you know, Dad, I'm sad, but I'll see him again. And I thought, do you know where you're going? Why? And are you comfortable with that? And that's what I want to leave you with tonight. I want to close this in a word of prayer, and we can hang out or do whatever, but let me pray for us. God, I thank you for my father, and Lord, I learned how to do a lot of things growing up in life. I've pulled things out of animals. I've done all sorts of things, Lord. I've learned how to fish. I've learned how to hunt. I learned how to handle guns, do all these different things. But the biggest thing that my father ever told me is about you. And the biggest thing that my father ever did is show me what it meant to be a man after God's own heart. And Lord, I just pray that when people would come here, that when people would hang out here, that they would learn about his story. They would learn all the stories and hear all the hunting things. Because, Lord, they're a big part of my dad's life. There's no doubt about it. But, Lord, that they would know my father's creator, and that they would know that my father had a relationship with his creator. And, Father, I pray that tonight every person here would answer in their own conscience those questions. Where am I going? Why? And am I comfortable with that? And if they're not, Lord, that they would turn to your word, that they would go to a church, that they would find answers, because the questions are too important to ignore. So God, we thank you for this time. We dedicate this area, Lord. We thank you. Creation is one of the greatest gifts you've given us, Lord. And I believe it is responsible to preserve it, to educate it, to enjoy it, Lord. You designed it. You want us to. God, we thank you for my father. I thank you for all the impact he had on people's lives, Lord. I thank you that he left behind a legacy. And Lord, I just pray that we would all be inspired to do the same. God, we thank you for this time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Jeremy, say anything else?
No, I think you pretty much wrapped it up very nicely. It was just, it feels so good to have such a nice turnout for this event. Like I said before, Art was truly special, and I think he'd be pleased. I want to thank everybody that helped make this happen. Thank the Segool family for traveling almost halfway across the country to be here. Pretty special to get that personal impact, and I can see the Segool in all of you. And it's wonderful. So unless anybody else has anything else, we can wrap this thing up. I know that, Mikey, are you here? There's probably plenty of food left down there. There's desserts. You don't have to go anywhere. Share some time, share some more stories, just hang out and enjoy.